Hard to know where to start with this parable. There's a lot. There are a lot of interpretations. Over the years, there have been a variety of different interpretations, some of which are based on religion, some of which are based on economics, some of which are based on unions, some of which are based on all sorts of different ideas and different ways that people come to this parable. Because you can, of course. It's a parable. There are all sorts of really interesting things in it. We could really Bible study it well, because it's a fascinating story. Partly a fascinating story because I imagine the initial reaction of people to hearing this story was, what? Because it seems counterintuitive. It seems counter to the whole idea of fairness and everything. Maybe it's not about fairness at all. But it does seem that way at first. And the people who first heard this story would have had some interesting reactions to it for a variety of reasons, all of which involve asking some questions about what's really going on in this story. There's a lot. So just quick rundown. For some people, there are some key questions that need to be answered in this story. For instance, when the landowner comes to the town and sees people standing around idle, why are they idle? Why aren't they working? Are they lazy? Or do they just simply not have work? And if they don't have work and the landowner needs workers, why doesn't he hire them all at the beginning of the day? Is it truly because each time he goes to the town square and he sees people who aren't working, he responds to their need by giving them work to do? Or is it because the landowner is really cheap and doesn't want to hire them for a whole day? When they all end up working at the end of the day and they go to be paid and they all get paid the same thing, is that fair? They didn't all work the same amount. So is the landowner being unreasonable and cheap? Or is the landowner being fair and reasonable because he's responding not to what they worked for, but what they might need in order to live? Because after all, maybe they weren't standing around because they were lazy, maybe they're standing around because there's no work and they have families to feed. There's a lot in the story. And sometimes people will look at the story and they'll go, oh, so clearly it's a commentary on the socioeconomic system in which we live. And wait, so is it about the fairness of giving everyone the same, and the value of what they work, or is it about need? And some people will look at this parable and they'll say, oh, it's about need. And in fact, the parable lately has come to be a pillar of the argument for a fair living wage for everyone, regardless of what they are working at, right? So that even if you are not employed, you are actually receiving what you need to live. That's the point of the story after all. Is it though? Or is Jesus trying to make a point about the system in which we live, which appears to be broken, in that people aren't fairly compensated for the work they do? Or is the parable a religious commentary? This is absolutely true. In the earliest days of hearing this parable, people interpreted it as meaning those who were hired first were Jews, and those who were hired last were Gentiles. And the point of the parable is that they are all equal before God. So it was a way of trying to convince the earliest followers of Jesus, who were all Jews and thought that Jesus was just for Jewish followers, and so people needed to be Jews before they could be a follower of Jesus, to understand that no, Jesus is for everyone. And then of course, there's the obvious interpretation, which is God's love and grace is for everyone. That's the point. Because after all, the parable begins with, the kingdom of heaven is like. So Jesus is in fact not talking about this. He's talking about the kingdom of heaven. And in the kingdom of heaven, God's love and grace is for all, regardless of when they come to God, regardless of how they come to God, regardless of what effort they put into coming to God. None of that matters. What matters is you are loved just as you are for being who you are, how you are. And that's how the kingdom of heaven works. Hang on for a minute, though. That allows us to interpret this story as meaning, here's Jesus talking about the kingdom of heaven, which is not here. And yet this is the same Jesus who frequently talks about how the kingdom of heaven is not only near, it is here. How is that, then? Well, the story doesn't actually begin with the kingdom of heaven is like. The story actually begins with the very thing that ends it. And so maybe the good place to start with this story is the end, which is also the beginning, which is also the end, which is precisely the point. What exactly does Jesus mean when he says the last will be first and the first will be last? Because he doesn't just say it at the end of the parable. He actually says it before he starts the parable, as he's wrapping up an earlier story he's been talking about, a rich person who wants to know what they need to do to get into the kingdom of heaven. And Jesus, of course, replies with, well, give away everything you have to the poor and take care of everyone. And the rich person can't do that, so they go away. The last shall be first, and the first will be last. The way we look at that tends to reflect also how we look at fairness on the basis of the society and structure in which we currently live. And that says fairness is about everyone getting the same thing. Except it isn't at all. Not to Jesus, anyway. Fairness isn't about equality. Fairness is about equity. And equity isn't about everyone getting the same thing. Equity is about everyone getting what they need. I'll come back to that. But we're going to look at last shall be first and the first shall be last. Or is it the first shall be last and the last shall be first? Who can really tell? It's really the same thing, isn't it? Sure. Except the way we structure things, we have order. We have hierarchy. We have which team's in first place and which team's in last place. Oh, Oilers. We have structure because we have comparison. We have competition. We have hierarchy. We build structures in order to have order. Unfortunately, that order also then tends to build on top of each other, and so we have this structure of who's first and who's last. And so when Jesus says who's first and who's last, and that the first shall be last and the last shall be first, we immediately go, so this goes here, and this goes here, or wait, this goes here, this goes here. Wait, what about all these ones in the middle? Does this mean that if you're second, you're going to be second last? Does it mean if you're third, you're going to be third last? What about if the order is based on gold, silver, bronze, and not first, second, and third at all? What do you do then? And none of that's the point. The point is, by the first being last and the last being first, there isn't any order. The point is equity. That we are all equitable. There isn't an order. Because the kingdom of heaven is like this. And then he tells this story. And I think the reason for all of this isn't to dissuade you from understanding that fairness isn't what you think it is. I think it's to convince you that fairness is exactly what it ought to be if you understand what's at the heart of it, because that's what's at the heart of you. See, I don't think Jesus is interested in equality at all. He's interested in equity. I don't think Jesus is particularly interested in who's first in line or who's last in line. I don't think Jesus is interested in there being a line at all. There simply is people. People who have needs, and those needs need to be met in order that they be cared for. In fact, I don't think Jesus is necessarily always just interested in things like kindness and care. I think what he's really interested in is less about charity and more about love. It's more about engagement. It's more about relationship. It's how do we build something together. where everyone is fed, everyone is well, everyone is whole. That's what the kingdom is about. And that's why Jesus keeps saying it's near, because it is. Because we're capable of those things. We're absolutely capable of those things. That's what's in you. That's what the good that's in you is capable of doing. We learned it's so much easier, first of all, to not do that. We've learned also that power is an amazing thing. Especially if you have power over others. You can make them do what you want them to. And that means you can make everyone else do the same thing so that you can have power over them. It means you can control things like how often people work or how often people don't work. It means you can control what they get paid or what they don't get paid. It means you can control how people live their lives. That's why Jesus isn't interested in power over people. He's interested in sharing power with people. He's interested in equity. One of the big problems with equality is that it assumes that everyone should get the same thing because it assumes that everyone starts from the same place. And everyone doesn't start from the same place. That's why we need equity. In order to have equality that does any good at all, we need to have equity. And equity says we don't all start from the same place, and so we need what we need in order to bring us to the same place. I think that's the story that Jesus is trying to tell here. I think he's trying to tell us a story, not that's going to say specifically, this is right, or you should do this. I don't think there's a simple interpretation of this story at all. I think the point of the story is to poke a stick into those things that we do that create that very dynamic in the story. We create hierarchies, we build structures, we do those things all the time. And then we decide what equality is. From within those structures, on top of those structures, we then offer the kindness and the care. And Jesus says there's something much more fundamental than that. And you need to knock those down, disrupt those, and get back to the thing that's the fundamental, the root, the base on which you're going to build these things. And those things are equity. Those things are, instead of charity as we currently understand it, which is, here's some money that will help you. Thank you. Go away now. I've got a tax receipt. Jesus means love and care, connection, engagement. Do something about it. Be involved in it. Build a relationship. Jesus doesn't want to create a place where things are just simply everyone gets the same. That's not what the kingdom of heaven is about. The kingdom of heaven is about responding to need. It's about engaging people. It's about building relationships. It's about making a place where everyone can feel whole in themselves and whole as part of this thing we call, we have language that we use in church all the time to talk about things like this. We say the church is a family. It's a community. We have such excellent examples of dysfunctional families in the world, such excellent examples of dysfunctional communities in the world. We have excellent examples of communities that don't get along with other communities, not just globally, but locally too. We have such excellent examples when Jesus so frequently talks about being a good neighbor. We have such excellent examples of what it means to not be a good neighbor. We build fences, we build walls, we create barriers. And within us, the fundamental thing on which the kingdom of heaven is built is the very opposite of that. It's the things that create relationships and build people up. It's the things that create respect and bring people together. It's the common unity, right, of community. That's when the last and the first, that none of that matters. It simply matters that we are all. And there are some things. Jesus doesn't just talk about them, he demonstrates them on a regular basis. Love, for instance. And what does that mean? Well, it means a lot of things. It means engagement, it means care, it means offering grace to others. That is a huge one. That is a huge one for us. Because it's not only so necessary so often, it's so lacking in who we are often. We often don't offer grace to ourselves, let alone to others. In the kingdom of heaven, we build on those fundamental things, which are love and grace, compassion, care, the ways in which we engage others and build relationships. A really good place to start is grace. If we offer grace not only to ourselves but to others, we are opening the door. We're opening the door on love and compassion and care. We're opening the door that allows us to connect. And I'm totally stealing a line from Jesus Revolution now, but the door goes both ways. It's not just about the grace that we offer to others. It's about the grace that we accept and receive ourselves. The kingdom of heaven is near. That's a really good place to begin. So Jason is going to help us begin there. As Jason has an awesome song about grace that might also, in it, he's included a song you might recognize too, because it's pretty amazing. Here's Jason.